Hi, welcome to another episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm Steve Richardson, a bankruptcy attorney trying to keep people on their path to financial stability and independence through education. Millennials are somewhat the middle child generation when it comes to saving for retirement. Although, on average, they began saving 10 years earlier than baby boomers, Gen Z started at the age of 19, which is 16 years earlier than the average baby boomer and 6 years earlier than millennials. As such, although they do have an edge over boomers, they have to play catch up vis a vis the Gen Zers. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talk with retired attorney and investment guide Dan Solin on what millennials can do to get to the retirement finish line successfully. My guest today is Dan Solin, the New York Times author of the Smartest series of books, which include the smartest investment book you'll ever read, the smartest 401k book you'll ever read, the smartest retirement book you'll ever read, the smartest portfolio you'll ever own, the smartest sales book you'll ever read, and the smartest money book you'll ever read. He's also the author of Ask How to Relate to Anyone and Does Your Broker Owe You Money? Suffice to say, he's written a lot of books. He's also an attorney who, before retiring, represented many investors that were harmed by the misconduct of brokers. In 2005, he testified as an investor advocate before the Subcommittee on Capital Markets, Insurance, and Government-Sponsored Enterprises of the Committee on Financial Services in the U.S. House of Representatives. His latest book is Wealthier, the Investing Field Guide for Millennials. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Steve, it's great to be with you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, well, it's good to have you on. The question I had when I first looked at what you do is your latest book, as I just mentioned, and Investing for Millennials. Well, what caused you to pick that generation to discuss in your book as opposed to another one like Gen Z?
So I'm fond of saying I don't write books for fame or fortune, which is fortunate because making a living writing books is extremely challenging. I write books to impact people in a positive way. Millennials are roughly 14 million of them in the United States. They're largely underserved because many of them don't have enough money to be attractive to financial advisors. So when I used to give talks, I would get questions from people graduating from college saying, how do I invest? How do I start investing? And so I wanted to write a book that would put a generation of Americans on the right track right from the beginning. What's in the book is equally applicable to Generation Z, but it's really kind of geared for millennials who are starting their careers and who will continue to grow in their careers. And it takes them from that beginning all the way through retirement.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly millennials have, from what I've been reading, have it over us boomers. They're reported to be about 10 years ahead. They start about 10 years earlier than us boomers in saving for retirement, but they're still lagging behind a little bit on Gen Z, which actually starts 6 years earlier than the millennials do, often around the age of 19. So yeah, there is a fair amount of playing catch up still for millennials, I would think.
Well, I think that's all true. Everything you just said is totally true. The problem, millennials are complicated, like all of us are, really. But they're technologically more savvy than we are because they never have lived without technology. And that access to technology is a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
If you really understand technology, it's very easy to do positive and negative things with your money. And the negative things you can do are use various platforms to trade incessantly, which simply runs up costs and negates your returns.
Mm-hmm.
They're also attracted to what I call shiny objects in investing, like cryptocurrency and alternative investments and other things that don't have a lot of data to support them.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly technology has leveled the playing field to a great extent in gaining access to investing. It used to be, decades ago, you had to go to a broker or a financial advisor or somebody that could buy the stocks for you, manage the portfolio, things like that. But now, anybody can use a lot of these investment platforms now and buy and sell really without the research or knowledge or expertise or experience needed to ensure success to a great extent. So yes, I agree with you that the technology can be more of a curse than a blessing.
Well, it is what you just said is absolutely correct. I mean, it's a good thing that millennials don't necessarily need any assistance to invest as long as they have basic information for how to invest.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with the information that I provide, which is all academically sound, is that there are huge industries that have a vested interest in persuading millennials and other investors that what I'm talking about is not the way to invest, because you can't really make any money telling people to buy 2 exchange traded funds and not trade them other than possibly rebalancing from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe in the data supports that investing is both simple and easy. Jack Bogle, your neighbor in New Jersey, who is an icon to those of us who study investing, used to say investing is simple, it's not easy. I don't like disagreeing with him, but it's both simple and easy if you know exactly what to do.
Mm-hmm. But maybe the blessing is, if your experience as an attorney actually going after brokers for bad acts, that, I guess the blessing is the independence from brokers, where if you get good advice from other sources, that you're less susceptible to that problem of dealing with the risk of an unscrupulous broker.
Well, absolutely correct. I mean, every time I hear that somebody, I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but every time I hear that somebody is entrusting their savings to a broker, what goes through my brain first is, well, they're probably going to make investing complicated. They're probably going to put you in expensive, actively managed funds. There probably is going to be excessive trading. I really wish you knew about index-based investing because you'd be far better off. And so many times, both when I was a practicing attorney and as an author and consultant to advisory firms, I've seen so many situations where basically wealth is transferred from those who earn it to those who manage it. And I feel horrible every time I see it.
Yeah. So getting started, you make an interesting point. The millennials may not have enough money to interest some investment professionals. So that's a nice niche. But in general, anytime you should always start early. And the earlier you start in investing, the better. But the problem is, of course, you're dealing with a goal that is so far off, that is decades away, and it doesn't give you that feedback loop, that instant gratification. You stated that your brain equates doing this with giving money to a stranger, which is an interesting way of putting it. But what are some of the ways to overcome that feeling and really get ready to jump into the fray and start investing for retirement?
So let's go back a little bit to examine the premise of that question. It's absolutely true that younger people find it hard to imagine being older. And there's a lot of psychological data. They feel they're always going to be young and vibrant. So planning for retirement is not high on their list because they have trouble visualizing it. But a more pressing barrier to investing and saving for retirement is the fact that many millennials are saddled with student loan debt, credit card debt. They have conflicting priorities, like they want to buy a car, they want to start a family, they want to buy a home, they don't have insurance, and they're made to feel like shamed because they're not saving what every financial expert says they should be saving 15 to 20% of their gross paycheck, starting with the first paycheck, so they can take advantage of what's called the miracle of compounding. And so what I tell millennials in my book is, don't feel badly because you can't start investing. Get your ducks in order, pay off high credit card debt, pay off your student loans. If somebody else depends on you for income, be sure you have disability and life insurance, whatever it may be, term or certain forms of whole life if you can afford it. And then and only then should you start investing. And while you will be behind the 20-something who started investing earlier, if you keep your standard of living below what you're earning as your income goes up, you can make up for lost time. It's called consumer smoothing. And what you do is you basically say, okay, I couldn't save in my younger years because I had all this debt and all these conflicts. Now I'm doing better. I'm making more money. So instead of trading up, saying, okay, well, I had a Kia, I'm going to buy a BMW, stay with the Kia. It'll get you to the same place, and put that extra towards savings. So now you may be able to save 25 or 30% for a period of time, and that'll get you on the right track.
Yeah. Well, with millennials, of course, as opposed to Gen Z, I mean, yeah, Gen Z, one of the big downsides is, they just recently graduated from college. They have a lot of student debt, things like that they're struggling with, and to put money aside to do that can be difficult, especially if they're looking to maybe own a home someday, get married. But millennials now, they're in their 30s, and they're a lot of them now have already gotten married, bought a home, have children, so they've already realized a lot of these expenses that they have in the mortgage payment, the cost of the children and everything else, and they probably still have student debt that they need to pay. So they've already realized some of the barriers that you're talking about. But yeah, the as much as you can put aside, and yet keeping your learning to live below your means, I think, is an important skill and habit to get into, and not necessarily have your cost of living scale with your income, because then you have more and more to invest and put away. So putting away and
true.
Yep. So putting away and saving for retirement, okay, you're starting to contribute and things like that, and your goal is to have enough money at some point to cash out and retire. But that begs the question of, more specifically, what is that goal? Anytime you have a goal, it should be a measurable one. So your goal is not necessarily saving for retirement, it's saving enough to retire, which can depend on when you want to retire, what you want to be able to do in retirement, things like that. So if a lot of people probably don't know, you say that people probably don't need as much as they think to have a successful retirement. Why is that? And what should they be considering or looking at in quantifying that goal?
So we're all different, right? We all have different goals. I like to state the goal as not being able to retire. I mean, I hope never to retire. I really enjoy my work, and I have no desire to stop working. I wouldn't know what to do. And there's a lot of data supporting kind of my choice, because when people have a mission and they feel like, oh, I'm worthy, I'm still relevant, and I have a reason to get up in the morning, those people tend to live longer. So the goal of retirement, I think, is you're kind of made to feel like there's something wrong with you if you don't want to retire. But I think the goal should be financial independence, because financial independence gives you the ability to retire or not to retire, or to do a hybrid retirement. So that's the goal. Now, what that looks different for different people, right? For some people, I mean, the standard is you're going to need 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income to maintain your quality of life in retirement. But there's a lot you can do to reduce. There are a lot of things in retirement that give you pleasure that don't cost a lot of money, like relationships, having healthy relationships with other people, many experiences, particularly like volunteering, being kind to other people, having a day-to-day existence that is worthy of you. These things don't cost money. Practicing gratitude, saying how fortunate I am just that I'm able to get up and do what I want to do. Those things don't cost money. You also have some options like downsizing. For many people, they're in big homes. Their homes have appreciated in value. They have some options like selling the house, moving to lower cost areas. This is becoming more and more challenging, obviously, but there still are low cost housing areas in the United States. If all else fails, there are some more extreme solutions like tiny homes or retiring to another country where there's low cost, where the cost of living is much lower cost. So the message I want to get across is that millennials and others have a lot of options when it comes to retirement, and not all of those options require saving millions of dollars to have a successful retirement.
So really what we're talking about here is not saving for retirement. The goal isn't retirement. The goal is financial independence. So you
Right.
can say at a certain, well, by the time I reach such and such age, whatever your goal age is, and that can vary from person to person, say, all right, when I reach this age, I want to have financial independence to the point where I'm working because I want to, not because I have to. And that can be very liberating. And you talked about 70 to 80% of your income to maintain life and retirement. But again, that depends upon where you retire to.
Right.
If you're living like me in New Jersey, which is a very expensive state to live in, or New York City or something like that, where you're generating the income to live there, pay your bills, and invest for retirement. But if you move out to some less expensive place within the United States, more tax friendly, more retirement friendly, then through geographic arbitrage, you get a lot more juice from the squeeze, as it were, because you've created uh, assets and investments and things like that that can create income that will far exceed the cost of living and where you retire to, right?
Exactly. By the way, I like the phrase geographic arbitrage. I'm going to start using that now. Um, I think there's one other thing. I only read this a couple of days ago. It was written by a financial advisor who said, I looked at the situation of most of my wealthy clients, and I tried to figure out where does their wealth come from. He said almost none of them would say my primary source of wealth is the amount of money I was able to save for retirement. With respect to just about all of them, it was the fact that they had a business and sold the business, and they invested most of their money into their businesses, and that's what created their wealth. So one decision that millennials turn out to be a very entrepreneurial generation. And we should be encouraging millennials to pursue their entrepreneurial spirit, because if I had a choice, if I was a millennial, had a choice between starting a business or in working for somebody else and investing whatever percentage of my salary I'm supposed to invest, for the most part, I like the chances of starting the business, even though I'm well aware of the data that says that most businesses fail. But most wealth is created by starting businesses and building those businesses up and selling them. So millennials shouldn't believe that the only way to achieve financial independence is saving money and working for someone else.
Well, that certainly tracks with research done by the authors of the book, The Millionaire Next Door. They indicate that a significant portion of American millionaires have businesses or self-employed. And that is a big factor in looking at it. And you're right, millennials and to a great extent Gen Zers are very entrepreneurial. They're more, they don't necessarily want to work for someone else. They want that freedom to do what they want to do. So hopefully that will work. And if yes, most businesses fail, but usually And a business writer, a guy named John Paul Mendoza, wrote a book that said it was titled "Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. It just takes 3 years for them to find out." Because most all the mistakes that lead to failure in a business are what you write on the back of that napkin at the coffee shop. So better planning can lead to a better business and greater success. So what we were talking about, uh, how much, what kind of goal you're looking for. I guess it's not, there's not a formula we can talk about here because it's so individualized. Just a matter of what your goals are, what you need to do, and talking to an investment professional about those goals so that
Yeah,
you
there's
can.
not a formula for how to achieve financial independence, but what this
Right.
conversation has stimulated in my own thinking is this. I don't want people to think that the only way to achieve financial investing is by investing in the stock market, as I
Mhm.
just indicated. However,
Right.
what I do want them to do is if they do invest in the stock market, which inevitably everybody has to do because it is a way to achieve all or a part of your retirement goals, I want them to at least achieve the market returns that are theirs for the taking,
Hmm.
benchmark returns. So historically, the stock market, let's define it as the S&P 500, although that's not a globally diversified benchmark, but let's just say that the benchmark return of the total global stock market is 10% annualized. Unless you are an index-based investor who's buying an index fund geared to that index, it is very unlikely that you are going to achieve those returns. In fact, anecdotally, and it should be taken with a grain of salt, I've never met any investor who buys actively managed funds who has achieved a 10% annualized return. It's yours for the taking. You don't have to do anything. Yes, maybe you could do better, but you are most likely to do worse. So buy two index funds, a total stock, or I suggest exchange traded funds, but a total stock market index fund, exchange traded fund like Vanguard's VT,
Hmm.
Vanguard Total Market Index funds, and an ultra short treasury bond fund. And focus on your asset allocation. For millennials, it should be predominantly in stocks. If you just did that, now you've solved the formula for how to achieve market returns with your investments.
Hmm.
Don't worry about getting more or less. Ignore all the cocktail party conversations where people are telling you how they invested in Nvidia when it was 5 or something, and just stay the course. You'll be fine.
Well, yeah, you're right, and my wife and I have been in index funds for decades, and that's what we used for a good part of our retirement planning, because most of these other managed funds don't beat the market average. Very few do. So even though you might be missing out a little bit more growth, but you're more likely to succeed with an index-based fund. And it's also cheaper because the management fees take a smaller bite out of your growth and your money.
Which is why they outperform over the long term. I mean, as you know, Standard and Poor's puts out what's called the SPIVA reports,
Hmm.
analyzes and compares the performance of index funds and actively managed funds and compares them to their benchmark.
Hmm.
Statistically, over a 15-year period, especially after taxes and fees are concerned, just about zero actively managed funds equal the performance of their benchmark. So you're obviously better off with index funds. The data is so indisputable that the only thing that keeps everyone from investing in index funds is the financial media, which has a vested interest in providing misinformation to
Hmm.
investors to keep the coffers of those who are paying for their airtime full. So they have all these people on predicting, doing all kinds of crazy things. But, and I can understand why they're economically motivated, but it's unfortunate because it's a powerful negative force that causes no end of harm to investors.
Hmm. Well, another thing that you talk about is that your behavior and not your investments will determine whether you will reach your retirement goals. How does behavior play into the equation?
So we live in a society, not just our society, but globally, where active is equated with progress. Nobody wants a passive child or a passive athlete. We want activity. So we think, oh, more activity equals more progress. So along comes reams of financial data saying, including from one of our great financial writers, Bill Bernstein, who's written some wonderful books like The Intelligent Asset Allocator and many others, who says, and I quote this in my book, I could teach a 7-year-old how to invest and beat the performance of most professionally managed investors by spending 15 minutes or less a year. That's true. With investing, the less you do, the better your returns are likely to be. But getting that across to young, virile people, very difficult message. Like I tell them, spend as little time on your investing as possible. Check your portfolio maybe once a year, if that. The less you check your portfolio, the more you just buy and hold and do nothing else. And everything else is really just noise, the better it's going to be. But when the markets tank, as they're going to, we go through peaks and troughs, right? The market goes up and down. Now the media goes into really gear, talking about how you have to flee to safety, and then everything, the world is crashing, and you don't have perspective of knowing that there have been 20 bear markets and 20 bull markets, and the bull markets far outlast in terms of time the bear markets. So you don't have that perspective, and there's nobody guiding your behavior. So you just react emotionally and impulsively. There are very few subjects as emotional as investing.
And that's one of the times my wife and I we never look at our portfolio when the market is down, because it can kind of be depressing. But the one thing to bear in mind too, and it depends upon what your retirement horizon is, right? Or your financial independence horizon is. How much longer will it be before you'll need the money where you can ride out these waves and take advantage of the lows? Yeah, the market may be down, but that means stocks are discounted. So if you continue to put money into the market and say, this, you're in an index fund, it's going to perform with the market. You may be in a low, but just keep throwing that money in there, because if you do nothing, if you stop investing because the market's down, when the market comes back up again, you'll just have what you had before the drop. But if you continue to buy discounted stocks, when those stocks get back up to the value they should be in a regular market, you've had even greater gains, right?
Absolutely right. So let's take your wife and you as an example. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of, you get depressed, as do I, when I see the market goes down. Nobody likes to see a declining value in their market.
Mm-hmm.
However, I know that I've allocated enough to bonds that I can sustain my lifestyle and wait out the bear market roughly a couple of years. So let's be conservative for you and say you should have at least 3 years of draw in the bond portion of your portfolio. So now you're absolutely right. Market goes down. The Nvidia stock, which was selling at 200 or whatever on Monday, is now selling at 100. It's the same company. It's just on sale. So as you make new investments, stick to your investment plan. Most people don't have an investment plan. Your asset allocation doesn't change because the market has gone up or down. Your investment plan stays exactly the same. So now you're gonna continue. If your asset allocation is 60-40, you're gonna be buying 60% stocks at a discounted rate, and when it goes up, you're gonna benefit.
Now, you do have to, as you approach your retirement goal or financial independence goal, you are going to want to start looking at it and see, does it need to continue to be 60-40 and or 80-20, or certainly the younger you are, the more risk tolerance you have, because it's going to be a long time before you're going to need the money. But as you get closer and closer, maybe within 5 years or so of needing that money, you need to kind of look at that portfolio again, don't you? And make sure that you have it's rebalanced into certain investments that, as you say, with bonds, will get you through the bad times, so you don't have to dip into those stocks until they can rebound, right?
So my view on bonds is I take no risk with the bond portion of my portfolio. So I only invest in treasury, short-term treasury bills and notes. So I always want to be sure that I have enough of those that I can that I don't have to sell stocks at a loss. What you said is completely true, that as you get older, maybe your asset allocation should become more conservative. So if you were 60-40 before you were, say, 60 years old and you're now 70, maybe you should be 50-50 or 40-60, meaning 40% stocks, 60% bonds. You should be aware, however, that there is fairly good data out there that says at all times you should be predominantly in stocks.
Mhm.
And the expected return of stocks is higher. And the bear markets don't last that long, like roughly 8 months on average. So it depends on a lot of things. The way my wife and I handle our own portfolio is I follow the adage that I don't take more risk than I have to. So
Mhm.
I'm not consumed with, oh, I could be in I can afford a more aggressive portfolio because I can afford the risk. It's like, why should I?
Mhm.
I don't want to look at my portfolio and see that it's down 40%
Mhm.
at my age. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So you should never, in my opinion, take more risk than you have to take.
Mhm. Okay. So, and one thing, just briefly to mention, it also with market ups and downs, my wife and I are. She has, a 401k with her employer. We have some Roth IRAs, but with the once things like 401ks or traditional IRAs at a certain age, you are required to take that money out, whether the market is up or the market is down. But a healthy portion of your portfolio in a Roth IRA allows you to let that money ride, assuming you can afford not to take any money out of it. Let that money ride, recover, and continue to be your hedge against inflation because you're not required to take it out.
So that's a very wise observation. And one of the things that maybe your wife or you would look into is whether you could invest in a Roth 401k, because
Mhm.
that doesn't have the same income limitations that a traditional Roth IRA has. But the way I view Roths is pay now or pay later, right? So yes, you're buying the Roth with after-tax money. So you're paying now. You're not getting a immediate tax benefit. But as you age, assuming you meet very modest requirements like holding the Roth for at least 5 years,
Mhm.
that all that money is compounding tax free and you take it out tax free. That can be a tremendous benefit.
Mhm. But in addition to assets like stocks or bonds or things like that, there's also real estate and home ownership is also a goal in a financial plan or as a way to achieve financial independence. In getting a mortgage, especially with interest rates doing what they are right now, do you recommend a fixed or adjustable rate mortgage for folks looking to buy a home?
So, first of all, unfortunately, I think the goal of buying a home is a very worthy one. There's good data that says that people who buy a home end up with a much higher net worth than people who don't. Now, that's kind of easier said than done these days. Home prices are through the roof, interest rates are high, getting a mortgage is challenging. You have to earn a lot of money just to qualify for a mortgage. But I think it's a worthy goal, even though advisors will tell you that if you rented and invested the difference, you would end up with more money. That's true, but as with most things in life, you don't invest the difference. You spend most of the difference, if not all of it. So let's just establish that owning a home, except in certain areas where, like San Francisco, let's say, or San Diego, where home ownership is just stratospheric when compared to rental, it may make more sense to rent in those areas.
I
On the more, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go on with your point.
On the mortgage question, I didn't know until I wrote this book that the United States is the only developed country where fixed rate mortgages predominate.
Hmm.
In every other country, adjustable rate mortgages predominate. Adjustable rate mortgages, if you're going to hold your home for 5 years or more, are generally more beneficial. People believe that they're not because they adjust. That's why it's called adjustable rate. And people are looking for certainty, so they're looking for a fixed certain amount. But adjustable rate mortgages are capped both during the incipient period of them and over the lifetime of the mortgage. So for most people, adjustable rate mortgages should be seriously considered.
All right. So you bought the home, you've held it or traded up in your lifetime in building equity, and you're approaching retirement or your tipping point on financial independence. You start thinking about, and my wife and I have talked about this. Do you pay off the mortgage, or do you keep the mortgage going and then just let it take its natural course? One thought is that, well, if you have a low enough interest rate, I mean, my wife and I were fortunate we refinanced at 3%. The money we would use to pay off the mortgage, if it stays where it is going to grow a lot faster than at 3% in a rate of return. And maybe it's better to keep it there. And there's things like credit scores, as you keep your regular monthly payments going, and that helps with your credit score. But are there advantages to just paying off the mortgage?
So there are pros and cons. It's a subject of great controversy amongst economists. The initial issue is a liquidity issue. So it's nice to be nimble, especially in retirement. And if paying off that mortgage is going to make you significantly less liquid so that you will be ill prepared to confront, say, a health emergency or another emergency, then you don't want to pay off the mortgage. On the other hand, psychologically, I've never met anybody who's paid off their mortgage and said, I regret paying off my mortgage and having no debt. It does reduce your monthly obligations. So therefore, you're not under that much pressure because you have fairly low expenses. But it's worthwhile doing the analysis for your particular situation. When I hear that somebody's refinanced at 3%, the issue is, if you paid off that mortgage, what are you going to do with that difference in money? Are you going to invest it? If you are you going to make more than 3%? You should be able to do that with your investments. So that's really the issue. And also, if you don't pay off the mortgage, say your mortgage is $300,000, you've got $300,000 you can invest. Mm-hmm. And you should. I mean, in today's interest rate environment where Treasury notes are paying 5%, right, before paying federal income tax, so maybe closer to 3.2%. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can make a compelling argument for not paying off your mortgage. The problem I always have when I'm trying to make the case for not paying off your mortgage is I don't know what I don't know. And I know I've been around long enough to see weird things happen. Mm-hmm. We plan, but our plans go awry for some reason. Mm-hmm. And I just have this feeling that having no debt is a very comfortable place to be for many people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, and certainly something that people should consider depending upon their situation. But to wrap up, I just want to talk a little bit about your latest book, and ask you if millennials out there listening to this might be interested in your book. What are some of the biggest messages that book has for millennials?
I'll tell you what I learned by writing the book that I didn't know before, because I knew all about how to invest before. I think however, the biggest message is investing is simple and easy. Just buy 2 ETFs, do nothing else, and ignore the rest of the world. You'll be fine. That's a major message. A second major message is don't believe everybody who tells you buy term insurance and invest the difference. Term insurance is better than whole life insurance if you can't afford any other insurance. Mm-hmm. But there are serious benefits to owning a blended life policy or a universal life policy, very much akin to the analysis we just did with owning versus renting a home. It's forced savings, and it turns out, and I did not know this, that with respect to those two kinds of policies, blended life and universal life, there are a few life insurance agents who represent a few companies who will discount their commission by up to 90%. So typically the commission on those policies is 100% of the first year's premium. If you can find one of those agents, I name one of them, I have no relationship with them, but he's the only one I could find. If you could find one of those agents, that $15,000 to $20,000, which is probably what your premium is going to be yearly, that goes into your investment account as opposed to into the agent's pocket. That's compounding over time. The numbers start to make a lot of sense if you know what you're doing with insurance. So those are the two messages. I think the third message, what that I didn't know anything about before was, and this relates to your question, Steve, about mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The value of a stoic mindset, of focusing on things that you can control and ignoring things that you can't control. Stoicism, I have found to be a very useful kind of framework for investors. Those are the three messages that are the basic takeaways from my book.
Now, other than all the books that you've written on various subjects, as I talked at the beginning of the interview, do you provide any other services for folks other than your books?
I don't actually.
Okay.
I have a consulting firm that consults with investment advisory firms, with only what's called evidence-based investment advisory firms, meaning those who recommend the kind of academically based investments that I advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no skin in the game, which is a reason why I tell people they should listen to me. I'm not trying to drive their business to me. I don't want them to call me, and you can't retain me as I'm no longer, I was a financial advisor. I am no longer. So the advice I'm giving is strictly merit-based. I have no other vested interest or conflicts.
Okay. Well, I'll certainly leave a link to your latest book and an Amazon link. I assume they're available on Amazon, that sort of thing. All your books.
All my books are available on Amazon, and the website for this book is wealthierbook.com.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells you all about this book and shows you all the reviews and summarizes what's in the book. So there's a lot of information on that website.
Okay. Well, great conversation, great approach in thinking about investing, not only necessarily for retirement. If that's not your goal, then certainly financial independence, and a lot to think about in how you approach reaching that goal. So thanks for coming on the show, Dan. I'm sure listeners got a lot out of it.
A great pleasure, Steve. Thanks again for having me.
Mm-hmm.